Welcome to Equipping Leaders, a podcast where I share and discuss resources, tools, and information to equip leaders to build creative, cohesive teams through culture and leader development. Welcome to the Equipping Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Natasha, and today I am sharing a conversation that I had with Executive Coach Vanessa Tennyson on empathy and the Triad of Discovery. Empathy is a huge factor when it comes to our leadership because the amount of empathy we have is demonstrated in the level of common sense that we foster in our organizations. So good morning. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, Natasha, it's just a pleasure to be here. I was so thrilled to get your invitation.
Oh, thank you. So we'll start. I'm going to have you introduce yourself and then tell us about your style of coaching.
Okay. My name's Vanessa Tennyson. I started a company called Capitalize Your Humanity when I left my previous career of 32 years. And my style of coaching is really empathy driven, but more along, so I bring a lot of empathy, but my style of coaching is get to the core of the individual, no matter what the problem is, no matter what the sense of urgency from moving from here to there, whatever it is, I want to know the core of the individual because then we can experience what's really going on. Because a lot of times, we end up getting masked with outside stuff that gets in the way of our core that's really trying to drive, the process. And when we start listening to the core and believing in it and owning it and living it every day, then really cool things happen because they feel right? They feel like, oh yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be going. So high empathy, a lot of deep personal questions that really go to, let's talk about what's behind this, not what you're saying. Because I hear what you're saying, but I also hear a lot of noise in that statement. So let's go behind that and talk about what got you here and see if that's the true path you're on, great. But if you're kind of on this other path that people have told you about, that you think you should be on, right? It's all about, if we can separate all of the noise and create an opportunity for you to be honest with the true honesty, true honest self-reflection, then we'll know we're doing the right thing.
I love how you said, get past all the noise, because that is there's just so much of it in all of our lives, and that's across every industry. And I also really appreciate that in that statement, you also alluded to that coaching is for everyone. Everyone can really benefit from this. You don't have to be some high-powered executive. It really is, it empowers everyone. So I love that approach. And having been a client, I can say it's amazing.
Thank you. I like your statement. It's true. I was asked the other day, well, who do you coach? I'm like, anybody that wants to be coached. I've worked with teams of administrative staff. I was hired by a company to coach their sales team and make them all high performers, right? And I said, well, where's the support team? Well, but I don't want you to coach them. I said, well, then don't bother. I said, because without the support team, that sales team's nothing. And they kind of looked at me and I said, you have to start with who's supporting whom. I said, this administrative staff is literally the lifeblood of your company, but you have always thought of it differently, and boom, everything switched. I mean, it was really remarkable. The administrative staff was thrilled, number one, to be paid attention to, but number two, to be heard. And then the sales people were really impressed with the movement in productivity because all of a sudden they were heard. Right? It's like, well, if you would give it to me this way, I could really expand. And the sales guys were like, holy crap, this really works well. So I love your statement that not only is it for everybody benefits from coaching because coaching is about you. It's not about me, it's not about others. It's just about you. And when I start my sessions, I start them all the same way. Look, my job is to create a safe, open space, free of judgment, for you to be as honest as you can possibly be about yourself. This entire time together is about you and you only. And we take a breath and they're like, okay, let's go. And as long as they're willing to, work together to create that space, because we do have to create it together, then really magic things happen. I've never been in a connected coaching session where magic hasn't happened because they're putting in the work and it's just it's super fulfilling for both parties.
And just that opportunity to be heard. We really underestimate like how much every person needs that. And I think in the past, way before, let's say 10 plus years in the past, like coaching was a remedial action, right? Like if you were in trouble, you got coached, or the exact opposite, where it was like, if we think you'll be an executive, so we're going to coach you. And then everybody else was just kind of forgotten. So yeah, to be able to go in there and like treat every person like they matter, because they always do. And give them that opportunity. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, as Columbia taught us, it's about asking the right questions and not giving advice. You do end up giving advice, but it's not the primary focus. And I found it interesting that in the past, when I've worked with people who have had prior coaching experiences, it really has been advice giving. One person, my first sessions, I generally, when I'm trying to recruit new clients, I'll give them the first session free so that they see what it's like. And that also creates an opportunity to see if there's a fit. And at the end of the session, the client said, okay, so what do I get? You don't get homework, you don't get a journal, you don't get, no, what you get is me. And if that's not enough for you, that's great. Happy to have spent the hour with you, but we're clearly not a match, right?
Yeah.
But they're so used to being told, here's what you need to do, that they kind of freeze up when you say, well, what do you want to do? Because they've never been asked that. The words shoulda, woulda, coulda are not allowed in our coaching session. And I have to is another banned statement. It's like, no, these are words that you have embedded into your language based on your prior experience that may or may not have anything to do with where you should be. Stop avoiding. Let's go there.
Just that concept with coaching where like they know what those next steps are. Shoulda, coulda, woulda, or this external thing. Well, if it really is right, you know that, and you'll be able to verbalize that.
And that is where the honesty sits in, is if they really will understand that I'm not there to judge. Because I think that is the very first hurdle is getting over that judgment phase, because we're so societally worked in, especially in the United States, on judgment from outside in instead of inside out. And then that ends up becoming embedded as an inside out thing. We just constantly judge ourselves. It's like, how about if we just let go of that for a minute and just be? How does that feel? Just let that go and just tell me, how does it feel just to be you right now? Well, I feel okay. Okay, so let's lose the judgment for a while and see what happens, right? And it's so strange. It's so foreign because everybody's competitive, or everybody's been, I have to win. I said, well, win. I had one client who said, I want to be like you. I want to be successful. And I said, yeah, actually no. My success is my success. Your success is yours. You cannot compare them. It's not, I want to be like you. You want to be like you, and your success will be different. I work, and I know you're an avid reader, and you're uber smart, and you got like 12 degrees, and it's amazing to me how people don't pay attention to lexicon, vernacular language, and how important language is. So I do spend a lot of time in the importance of language with my clients. One of the exercises I've used in the past is, I want you to describe yourself with 5 power adjectives, not nice or kind, but intentional, ethical, moral, authentic. I want the word to have a visual. But so if I just say one word, I get a description of you just in a vision of what that word means. And then I want you to use that word in a sentence describing how that describes you. And amazingly, I never get it done in one session. They all struggle because they've never done it before. And some highly intelligent people. And I'm like, I know this is hard. That's why I use it. The importance of words. Typically, somebody might come back and say, I'm brave. Okay, so what is brave? Well, I'm not afraid to go in there and, get beat up. Yeah, actually, that's courageous. I said, brave means I'm probably going to die, but I'm going to do it anyway. Courageous means I might get beat up, but I'm not going to die, and I'm going to do it anyway. I said, now which one fits for you? Oh yeah, I'm courageous. I said, great. I said, they get medals for bravery. I said, there's a reason they do that, because you were probably going to die, but you did it anyway. The importance of the word and its meaning not only to the client, but to the external world. When I say this to you, do you get the same vision that I have for myself? And once they get there, they really start to move through language quickly. And they're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? My spouse would say, I'm particular. And I would just say, I really like things to be correct. I said, it's just language.
Well, and I appreciate too how you said at the beginning when people, they may try to throw out words like I'm kind or I'm generous. And it's this very much this is how I want the world to see me. And this is really how I want my perceived self to be. Being kind and generous is all well and good. Is that what makes you who you are? You can be those things and also have these really powerful things that drive you forward. And those get to be kind of like the side effects of these other things that drive you. But I would imagine that people are very much like, well, I want the world to see me as, kind and generous. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like in mission statements when people are like, or in core values and people are like, we want people to have honesty and integrity. And I'm like, but everybody should have that. Everybody needs character.
Why should we reward normal?
So you kind of mentioned some tools that you use. Are there any other tools or frameworks that you found to be particularly helpful in coaching, whether it's for you to get into coaching or in an actual session?
In the Columbia framework, they use ORAD, which is a questioning framework. Basically, it stands for objective, reflective, interpretive, and decisional. And I like the ORAD framework. I don't use it as an intentional process, but I incorporate it into my coaching methodology that I use. In other words, I really do try to find ways to jump in with people on an objective basis and then move right into a reflective basis. So I might ask some very objective questions about trying to get to the core of what an issue is. But then I might move straight into reflective, like, oh, so you just said this. So now what does that actually mean to you? Describe that to me. And then once we get there, now we move into interpretive. And it's like, okay, so now we've described this thing that has meaning to you. Now let's stretch it out. Let's see what that looks like. So I want you to be interpretive about how do you see yourself when you describe yourself this way? And then, okay, I see myself, very competitive. Okay, great. What does that mean? And then describe the situation. Okay, so what's wrong with being competitive? Well, my spouse thinks I'm overly competitive, right? Okay, well, what does that look like? Right, so we keep going back and forth with these objective, reflective. Then we get to the interpretational. I'm like, so what is the issue here, right? I need them to interpret, what does overly competitive mean? And then we get to, okay, so your wife doesn't like X about this particular behavior. What can you do about it? Still not giving yourself up, but respecting her request for you to be a little bit different in terms of how that's shown to her or him. And then we get to that decisional framework. And then the first two take such a long time because we're trying to suss out all these different things. But then once we get them on the table, now we can start to address one individually and we make a decision and boom, we move on. We're like, great, that one's done. Write that down. We're going to deal with that some more. But we've got these other ones. So what's next on your list? And we start to make real accelerated progress. And as they start to be comfortable with then answering their own questions, I get them to start. But as they move forward, they really start to ask their own questions, which is really where it's a really powerful thing happening, where they're like, oh, well, why do I do this? I'm like, let's explore that. Where's that coming up from? Maybe it's a childhood thing. Maybe it's an experiential thing. Maybe it's something you saw in a peer that you admired and you wanted to replicate, right? So all these questions around interpreting data, and data can be in the form of emotions, it can be in the form of statements, it could be in the form of behavior, it could be, and it takes on a lot of different forms. And so when I sit with clients, it's almost as if there's a conduit that connects us. I feel their emotional energy and I take it on so that I can sit with them in these questions, because it's important for me to own their emotion to understand what point in time they're in terms of their progress. So the other side of ORAD for me is empathy. Empathy is my number one driver. I have been fortunate in my life to have lots of different experiences, both good and bad. Growing up a privileged white male, and then, suddenly discovering what it's like to be a transgender woman and live as a woman, and find, all the discrimination that I'd always known about, never really experienced. So I draw from a lot of wells. And what that provides me is the opportunity to say, yeah, I get that. And when you can empathize with someone, when you can be there with them and say, I understand that feeling, here's how that must feel to you. And they're like, oh, you really do get it. I'm like, yeah, I understand. So let's sit there and let's process this. Let's make sure that we're not letting it drive us, we drive it.
I love that you said emotions are data, because I think that sometimes people are like, oh, it's on a chart and it's quantifiable and it's like, these different things, but we don't acknowledge enough how people are feeling is really impacting how they're showing up for everything, whether it's professionally or personally. What kind of led you to being like, no, like emotions are data?
That's a great question. I haven't ever thought about it in that regard because it just seems so commonsensical to me, right? It's like, for me, emotions are things I have to pay attention to. And so when you have to pay attention to something, it's a data point, right? It's like, this is information. Why do I feel that way? Why am I, what are my urges? Where am I going with this? A statement I make about dealing with particularly difficult emotions. So let's say, you're angry. I call this process, don't pick at the scab. I said, so you're angry. So the first thing you do is not blow up. You think, I'm angry. Okay, I'm understanding that I'm angry intellectually. I'm like, okay, do I have a reason to be angry? So now I have to process intellectually, right? That's data, even though it's an emotion. Yep, I have a reason and a right to be angry. Great. Now that you've acknowledged it, let it alone. Just leave it there, because in 20 minutes, whether you pick at the scab or not, it's going to go away. But if you go pick at it, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and suddenly it's not anger anymore. Now it's frustration or apprehension, or it's turning all this different stuff. Just acknowledge it, leave it alone, and let it float away, because it's going to do that. And so when I say emotion is data, that's part of how that works, is recognizing what emotion is, and then using some intellectual process to desensitize the emotion, to understand the emotion, not get rid of it, but understand it and accept it, and either give it up or let it go away, or whatever your terminology is with it. Sometimes it means moving into it. If there's shame, if there's fear, if there's embarrassment, I have to move into it. I can't run away from it, because that's everybody's natural instinct is, whoa, I'm going to be embarrassed. Okay, what? Why are you embarrassed? Well, I might look stupid. To who? Why is that important? Are these people that you're trying to impress? Tell me more, right? All these data points that I have to explore are all wrapped up in emotion that people think are, well, that's just how I feel. But that is embedded in something, and we have to go discover it. And that's really where the work begins. And once they are open to using their brain to understand their feelings, a lot of good things can start to happen. Now, when I run into people who have depression or some kind of organic issue with their brain, then that looks differently. It's like, okay, that feels like the depression's talking. You need to talk to your therapist about that. But right now, it feels like your brain's telling you things that are mixed signals from what I'm hearing. So I want you to explore that with your therapist, and let's just leave it alone for the time being, because they're trained to deal with that organic issue. But as long as we can recognize it, again, I suffer from depression and anxiety. Having an intellectual experience that I can use to understand the emotion is really valuable to place oh, that's what's happening. Okay, move away, get out of that. Let's go over there, dark room, whatever the intellectual response is to an emotional outburst is, okay, that's good for me, right? It's my body and brain working in concert now, not against each other.
And I appreciate too, like those tools where there are things that are mental health issues and people should absolutely get the help and whatever they need for that. I'm pretty easily prone to depression as well, but I have found through coaching and also counseling and therapy, but having those tools where it's like, as soon as you notice something, being able to identify, like, I know where this leads. We're not going to go. I don't want to go there. But sometimes, as with any like mental illness, sometimes you can't catch it. You just need a little more help.
Exactly. And it really is important. So I deal with suicide as well. And I try to talk about suicide and suicidal ideation. And there's this misconception that, oh, just call me. I'm like, no, you don't understand depression. Okay. So what happens is trigger, I said, it's like asthma. Asthma is not one thing. Asthma is a bunch of things piled up that, oops, there it is, and it's spilled over. Now I'm having an asthma attack. Same thing with depression. Oops, now I'm in this really dark place. I'm not going to call you. That's not how it works. So I need to be aware of, oh, just like I loved how you said that. I'm aware of, oh, that just happened. I didn't expect it, but now I know where that goes. And I know what to do to prevent that from happening. And that's that whole notion of, okay, now I have to get intellectual about this emotion that's pushing me into a place I know is dangerous or wherever. I love how you said, it isn't just one thing. It's coaching, it's therapy, it's counseling, it's friends, it's peers, it's networks of people who understand and help you. And I really view coaching as part of that cadre of individuals that you look to for assistance in being the best you.
Yeah, you gotta have your team. That's what makes you strong, right?
Exactly.
I know that Sean Anker and other people, but in his book, Big Potential, he was really talking about how the first 22 years of our lives, we're really taught to like excel as individuals, right? And then we get into the workforce and now we have to perform as a team. But then he also really touches on this whole, like, it's almost like if you do it yourself, that means something special. And it's like, yeah. And that's fine, but you didn't do it yourself, right? You had people who empowered you, coaches who led you. Like, there's all these other things that we tend to forget, that it's like, that whole concept of it takes a village has been, that adage has been around forever, because it's true.
And it works in reverse too. It's like, okay, I did this by myself. And the reverse is I'm alone. It's like, well, but actually you're not. You don't have to do this by yourself. This notion of I have no capability of reaching out. It's like, yeah, actually you do. You're just blocking that because you think that somehow makes you weak, right? Yes. Again, so it's this notion of language and experience and making it something it's not. And maybe, yes, it is or was, but let's play it right today now. What does it look like right now? Because that's the stuff we have to deal with, is the stuff that's right in front of us. And because of our past experiences, we're like, oh, I know how to do that. So it's like with the depression thing, oh, I know where that leads. Okay, but that's a positive affect. So I have a thing that I use as well. I'm like, so do you make positive decision-making outcomes or negative decision-making outcomes? And I use the distinction as, okay, so you're taking a test. You're taking your certification exam to graduate from school and you're studying. And I say to you, well, I see you're studying. Why are you studying? And you say, well, because I want to pass. That's a negative outcome. I say to you, oh, I see you're studying. Why you're studying? I want to get a better grade. That's a positive outcome, right? Same thing, right? It's just how we view it. It's like, why are you studying? Well, I'm studying because I want to get an A, as opposed to I'm studying because I have to study, otherwise I'm going to fail. It's like, whoa, back up. You're pushing a negative in front. Let's remove the negative and say, I'm studying not because I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to pass. I just want to be passing at the highest level. And so this observational stuff, and I guess I hadn't thought about it till now, but yeah, one of my things that I use really quite often in coaching is observation. Almost always in a session, I might say, so what I see happening is this, or what I heard you say was this. How does that sit with you? Am I seeing that properly? One of the things that's really fun in coaching with people is when they quote unquote get it, and then they do just what you did. They get the big smile on your face. I'm like, okay, we're gonna stop here because something just clicked in your head because I just saw the big grin. What happened? And again, I think that's one of the things that as society, as high performers, and of course we deal with a lot of high performers as coaches, we never stop and celebrate. The bar just keeps getting raised. It's like, oh, well, what did you do to celebrate? Well, I got there. Now I've got a new goal. I'm like, well, but wait, what did you do to celebrate? Nothing. I expected to get that out. I'm like, no, stop. We have to celebrate that moment, because that was a moment of discovery for you. So you're like, wow, I never thought I'd get there. And I did. And I did so well, right? Take a moment. It doesn't have to be a week-long party, but it definitely needs to be a stop moment in time of, hey, let's go out to dinner or something and celebrate the fact that I got this. And then start again tomorrow. But too many type A personalities, we just keep ratcheting the bar up, and it's never enough.
It's so true. And I can think of like several times in my life when, like, for example, in the military, I was selected to be a part of the Audie Murphy Club, right, which was a big honor. And it was really funny because the next day I came into work and I just kind of like went about my business. And people were like, do you know that you just got selected for this? And in my mind, I was like, yeah, but that was yesterday. What have I done today? But yeah, to really take that moment and appreciate not only the effort that you put into something, but also the experience of that. Well, like actually going through that process made me a better leader in a lot of ways.
And I call that active acknowledgement. I use this with people who have trouble with compliments. I might say, wow, I really like your glasses. And you're like, really? No. That's everybody's first reaction. No. Here are the words. They're thank you. It's really simple. You say thank you and you own that moment. I said, and so people that have trouble with it, I said, okay, I'm going to give you a really easy example here. If someone gave you a birthday present, would you throw it back at them and say, no, I don't want this. I don't deserve this. What are you thinking? It's the same thing with compliments. And that's why I call it active acknowledgement. You worked really hard. It was a special thing. It didn't happen to everybody. It was a gift. It was a moment that you need to acknowledge, hold, and be actively thankful for. And I love the way that you describe it. It's like, well, but no, that was Tuesday. Today's Wednesday. Because it's like, because we're high achievers, we're like, okay, got it, right? Boom, let's move. Celebrate enough. And I call that active acknowledgement because it's like, it's not really for you. Yes, it was about you, but it's for everyone else. That's the active acknowledgement. They want to be prideful for you.
We think that being humble is so important, as if like acknowledging something isn't being humble. And then as soon as somebody else acknowledges that they did something good, we're like, that person's not humble. When in reality, they're just acknowledging.
And there is a fine line between ego and humble and humility, but it's not denial. It may not have been a big deal to you, but to everybody else, it was a big deal. And so opposed to, yeah, no, it wasn't a big deal. Now you've diminished me because obviously I don't know that it wasn't a big deal, so I must be wrong. Instead of saying it that way, I might encourage someone to say, thank you. It was a lot of work, but I really enjoyed the experience. I'm not going to minimize you by trying to deal with my own minimization. And I think that's what people forget, is that as we interact, as we are with people, we have impacts on them. And the way we respond to their stuff is important as well.
At the beginning, you said you have your company, Capitalize Your Humanity. So will you tell us about that? How did you start it? Why? What do you do? All the good things.
I would be happy to. It really was a divine intervention moment. And I'm not religious, but I do have a strong faith. I had left my company of 32 years, and coincidentally, I had scheduled my transition surgery at the Mayo Clinic for just a couple weeks after that. And so got nothing to do with my type A personality. I was thinking about, what am I going to do now? So I'm 55 years old, can do anything, right? There's no boundary. It's like we talked about earlier. It's like, well, I might want to do this for 20 years. That doesn't mean I'm done. And so it's a concept that a woman that I went to this fellowship with at the University of Minnesota, it's called Encore Careers. And she labeled it Encore Adulthood. A woman named Dr. Phyllis Moen. And her fellowship was a year-long academic fellowship about baby boomers who were leaving their quote-unquote traditional workplace and looking to do something else. She gave it this title, Encore Adulthood, and it's really kind of taken off as, why is your career over? The concept of retirement. And so I quote her a lot because she's this brilliant woman. The very first day of the fellowship, there's about 25 people in the fellowship. She says, there are two things we're never going to talk about in here. One is the word retirement. It doesn't exist anymore because the definition that we've been using forever isn't valid anymore. And she said the other is old. You are not old, you are experienced. And we continue to have the ability to have experiences. And it really rang true with me. I'm like, I'm 63, but I don't feel 63. I don't want to have an image of what 63 looks like. So I'm laying in bed. The words humanity kept coming up to me. It was like, I want to work with humans. I want to work with people. Suddenly, honestly, out of the blue, the word capitalize your humanity came up to me. And I just wrote it down. Capitalize has a number of meanings. One of them is make the most of. To capitalize upon a situation is how people typically use it, or to make the most of a situation. And so as I wrote the words down, I was like, oh my God, that stands for make the most of your humanity. I mean, it was just like that magic moment where it's like, wow. And I literally sent my lawyer an email. I said, I need you to do a search on the name of this company in Minnesota. And he came back and he said, I can't believe this isn't taken. And it's now a registered trademark. And the whole concept was around helping people be themselves, helping them be their best selves. There are doors everywhere around us all day, every day, all of our life. And we choose not to open them because we're either not interested or we're afraid. If you have the courage to open the door, knowing that you have no idea what's behind it, it could be bad, it could be good, it could be nothing, then you start to live your true experience. And I opened the door and said the words to my cohort, I'm thinking about being a coach. And 24 people went, I can't see you doing anything else. And that's how Columbia happened. Was I did the research and I wanted a face-to-face academic, research-based, rigorous program that said, when I said I'm an executive and leadership coach, I mean it. That's really how that whole thing started. And it's really it's taken on its own life. It's interesting because I developed the concept in February of 2018, but it feels like I've owned it my whole life. It just feels like it's me. When I say capitalize your humanity, I see myself. And so it's really this wonderful connection to the spirit world and to myself and the universe and how I'm supposed to be walking through.
You came up with the Triad of Discovery. Was that for the Columbia final paper?
It was.
It was. Okay, wonderful. So can you tell us about that and about the process of coming up with that model?
It's actually one of the stories I really like because I'd never been in an advanced a master's level program where I had to write official research. And so the project that I had chosen as part of the curriculum was coaching for LGBTQ people in corporate America. Turns out there hasn't ever been any research done on that. My professor, my advisor in my practicum happened to be a lesbian and we were talking about it and she was just like, holy crap, I can't believe there literally is no research on this. I'm so excited for you to do this work. Well, I'm not. What do you mean there's no research on it? She's like, trust me, you're the right person. You're the right person to do this. And I'm like, okay. And so the more I researched, the more all these different theories were in play that I started to move with and start to make my own. And what ended up happening as a result of it was all the research was recent, since 2018. So very, very recent research that talked about, it was a research done in London. I don't remember the specific university, but it was an academic research program. And what they wanted to test was, is there a difference in productivity between people who are out at work and people who are not out at work? I thought, wow, that's a fascinating project. And so sure enough, they created a test group. They did all these different things as researchers do, asking questions, developing questionnaires, and they actually quantified it, which really helped me. Turns out there was a 25% increase in productivity for people who were out at work. All they did was say, I'm gay. They didn't do anything else. They just said, this is who I am, and I'm okay with that. They then quantified it, so then I took that and turned it back into the United States GDP. Well, it turns out that a 25% increase in productivity of LGBTQ people, who make up 6.5% of the workforce, amounts to $100 million a year. in
Wow.
productivity gains. Now that was in 2018 dollars. And that's when I developed behavioral authenticity. And then the triad appeared to me, which was, this triangle, the triad of discovery was, and at the top of the triangle is behavioral authenticity. Everything starts with being who you are supposed to be. Not who you're meant to be, not who others tell you should be. Who are you? Who are you? What is your true self? And as that work happens, and if you can get there, if you can really identify, this is who I am, then as the pyramid drops down, enhanced performance is the right leg of the triangle. And since I know that scientifically that means a 25% increase in productivity, regardless of what it is, happens to have been quantified with a very easy source to say, are you in the closet or out of the closet? But then along the bottom becomes diversity of thought. And so by being myself, by increasing the availability I have in energy for more productivity, right? Because I'm not worried about how I'm presenting myself, what do I look like, what are my expectations for how I'm supposed to, all that energy is freed up. Well, obviously I've got more energy for performance, but I also have, more importantly, more energy to see things differently, or clearly, as I say. And that diversity of thought then rounds out the pyramid and becomes this constant cycle of, am I being behaviorally authentic? I need to constantly ask that question because we move in and out of it. It was also reinforced by, when I was at Columbia getting a business degree, they had a visiting scholar from Poland, this woman whose research was on female CEOs. And of course, at the time, I was a female CEO. And one of the professors said she should interview me. So we met, and she's interviewing me for her research. And she started off with a single question. She said, I'm curious how you manage who it is that you portray yourself to be in front of different audiences. And I said, no, I'm the same person regardless. And she asked it a third time. I said, look, if I'm at a softball game or if I'm in a board meeting, you get Vanessa Tennyson. That's it, all the time, like it or not. And I said, why is it so difficult for you to understand this? And I'm thinking maybe there's a Polish barrier, right? The language barrier. And she speaks perfect English, so I knew that wasn't it. She said, well, because you're the first subject in 26 to say that. And I said, wow, I really feel sorry for those other 25 people. Do you know how much energy it must take to put on a different face each audience? Oh my God. They must be exhausted at the end of the day. And then they have to put on another face to their spouse or their family. I said, look, it's just easier to be who you are. I said, people are either going to accept you or reject you. I said, as a transgender woman, I have to get this concept immediately. I didn't have a choice anymore. It was like, look, people are either going to accept you or reject you. You don't have any control over that. So what do you have control over? Who I am, how I present. So after my transition, my therapist said to me, well, you're an icon. And I really pushed back hard against that. I said, no. I do not want to be, nor do I deserve to be an icon. And this is a quote, well, tough shit. I looked at my therapist, she goes, I don't know how to break this to you, but not many 55-year-old successful businessmen become women. She said, you're an icon, period. You don't have a choice. And I really fought hard against that. And it took me, I was sitting in rage, I was sitting in a lot of different hard emotions, and it took me about 6 months. And I went back to, I'm seeing my therapist all along, but I went back one day and I said, I figured it out. And she's like, I love that you figured it out. That doesn't happen. I said, I have 30 seconds. I said, I have 30 seconds in every single engagement, whether I'm at the coffee shop or I'm at the car wash or I'm at work, wherever. I have 30 seconds to be my true self. After that, they've formed an opinion and I can't do anything about it. I said, so I'm going to endeavor that every first 30 seconds, I'm going to be true to who I am and bring my honest, full self to every single minute of every day. And she says, and that's going to be exhausting. I said, yeah, and it's going to be fulfilling too. And I said, it's not my job to create acceptance. My job is to create understanding. And I've witnessed some remarkable transformations of people who had an opinion about what transgender is, about what a transgender woman, why, right? Driven to tears with, oh my God, you're one of the nicest people I've ever met. I can't ever believe I felt this way. And I'm like, that's okay. You got there on your own. That's all that matters. You formed your own opinion. You didn't listen to everything else that you were being told about what it is that you should expect from a transgender person. The beautiful thing about everything is because I live who I am all the time, I bring that into my coaching and I get to show people what it looks like. And I'm like, this is what it looks like. It's not easy. Nobody said it was. In fact, it's a lot of hard work because you get to be in a bad mood just like everybody else. But you also get to own who you are and be that person all the time, because guess what? Nobody is going to second guess you ever again.
So this has been absolutely amazing. Where and how can people find you if they want to learn more about you and your work and any upcoming projects?
Very cool. Thank you for that. It's just capitalizeyourhumanity.com. It's just real simple, and you can type in my name and capitalize humanity will come up on a Google search. So I'm happy to reach out to everybody that wants so like I said, generally my first session is free. We spend time together and determine if there's a fit, and if there is, we go forward. I consider it a privilege to have the opportunity to be with you and people like you who really value being purposeful and intentional in their lives. So this has been just wonderful. Thank you so much.
In this episode, Vanessa and I touched on a lot of topics, and the most prevalent topics were empathy and research for building a framework. To explore these concepts more for your own self-development, I would invite you to journal about a few questions and a quote. The first question is, in what ways do you demonstrate empathy in your organization? And the second is, if you were to design a new framework for your coaching or leadership, who would you want it to empower? The quote I have for you is from Tara Brach, who said, "When we feel flawed, we are looking through eyes that look for what's wrong in other people too." Thank you for listening to this episode of Equipping Leaders. All of the resources mentioned in this episode can be found on my website, natashacheyenne.com, as well as timestamps to help you get right to the resource that you are looking for. On the website, you can also find a weekly leadership journal entry, a resource page with challenges and downloadable content, a place to sign up for my weekly newsletter, and an upcoming leadership platform full of workshops. You can also follow me on Instagram at novel_Natasha and on Twitter and Facebook at Natasha Cheyenne. If you'd like to hear more about a specific topic, please reach out and let me know. Join me next week for another episode.